Hello, how's it going, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Louis, and after 6.5 years of working in the design industry, I've just decided to quit my job and go freelance, which is pretty mad. So in today's video, I thought I'd show you a little bit the process of working on a freelance project. I've got to do a poster design for TYPEONE Magazine, along with some social content, so showing you a little bit of insight into the behind the scenes on how I actually do that. So the brief for this project, as set by TYPEONE Magazine, was to design a poster based off my favorite issue, which for me is TYPEONE issue number 3. I'm sure many of you have either seen this or you maybe even have it as well, but this issue focuses on experimental typography and lettering, specifically within a graffiti style. So now I've got to think, like, how can I use this to inspire my own poster design? So one thing I've been trying to think about a lot recently is my likes, my interests, and my influences. Not, oh, I think that's cool. Like, what do I actually like about it? And like, try and actually break that down into kind of the individual elements. For instance, with this cover, it's clean, monochrome, it's minimalistic, there's a lot of movement going on, it's interesting. And I also really like the texture, which is, yeah, a bit mad, but it's really nice and it feels really premium. And I love graffiti. I'm constantly taking photos of any like tags, stickers, anything on the back of a pub door, like a back street, that sort of thing. But what I noticed about this is it wasn't even the big detailed pieces with a lot of complexity to them that I was actually taking photos of. It was like the more minimal, even sometimes quite bad, like tags. Don't know what it is about it. A lot of the time it's actually the composition of where they are, like kind of having this really rough and loose and slightly unprofessional maybe tag on the side of this granite building. The juxtaposition of the two things I just always find like quite interesting, which led me to take this photo when I was in Athens earlier this year. So I was walking down some really nice streets, you know, plants, cool restaurants, that sort of thing, where I saw this weird base graphic just on the side on the wall. It really stood out just because of where I was and what I was kind of there to do. It just, I don't know, it just caught my eye. So I thought that was really interesting and decided to take a photo of that. So this has become the starting point for my poster design today, which I'm going to design and print in A1. I don't know why, I just thought let's print it in A1. So I'm going to start off by making an A1 document, and normally most poster designs I'll do in Illustrator or InDesign, but some of these experimental ones I'm just having fun designing. I don't know, I feel like it's not that serious. So I'm happy to just play about in Photoshop today. So I'm creating my document and I'm adding 3mm bleed on each side. Only thing is with Photoshop is you have to kind of do that yourself rather than have it added on as a bleed like you do in Illustrator or InDesign, which is a bit annoying, but we move. So I'm going to start in by adding my headline text, and for this I had the idea of the design being a bit unfinished and a bit disjointed. Much like this face smiling and having no eyes, it gave me the idea of almost being something. So that's where I come up with the idea of the big text copy here of almost something. We can condense the tracking on this a little bit here as well, like so. So I'm going to add the text in here, nice and big copy at the bottom as well. And I can condense the tracking on this a bit here as well, just to kind of bring it in a little bit. And then I'm also going to drop in this artist text back into the design with the copyright symbol next to it. Pay a bit of respect to the original artist, you know? And almost like they've tagged the wall, it's almost like they're tagging my poster, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. Because of this, I'm actually going to have them overlapping a bit, just like a nod, as if, again, like they're adding it to my design rather than being part of the original, which I think was a nice concept. And I'm not sure why, but I like this idea of this being like a canvas that can be sprayed onto. So I'm going to create this white box in the middle here, I think. I kind of just change the size of that, just so it crops the text slightly. Not too much, I still want this to be legible, but I think it would be nice if we left a bit of a space to add our artwork into. Allow it to sit inside. It also reminded me a little bit of when you're spraying a stencil and you sort of get that extra little bit around the outside of the paper on the corners and stuff. So that's where my head's at right now. Nice. Only thing is, this is way too clean, so I think we need to add a bit of ink bleed into this and roughen up the edges of it, which we can do with some blur and some threshold. Sweet. I do want to have that artist text in there. It's actually cropping it off too much at the moment and it's getting quite lost, so I can just add that back over the top and sort of break that crop a little bit. Next, I can drag my image in, and I only wanted to use the graphics, the sort of face graphic for this image, not the image itself. So what I could do is I can select the color here with the swatch, set it to this color, and then I can sort of mask the rest of this out. I really don't care about the mask not being perfect, or if there's any leftover bits, because I can just use this brush on the mask to tidy that up a bit and then finish it off by adding a color overlay anyway, so it's just all one color. So that is fine. I'm also going to remove the text in the middle, I think, and I'm going to replace this with some of my own cleaner typography. I still want to have a similar composition to the original design, so I may have to move this image around a little bit just to make sure I can kind of frame the text in the middle. But I wanted to note the inspiration behind this design, and then just listing out the location as a nice memoir, a bit of a memory. So it becomes a bit of a date stamp on my holiday as well, which is nice. I can also add a little bit of ink bleed to this as well, so it matches the rest. I have the base composition right, but the problem is it still feels a bit off balanced, as in the face does. This left hand side still feels a little bit empty to me, so I can potentially add in here like a little bit small copy and see how that looks. It's definitely better, but I still feel like it's still quite empty. The balance still isn't there. What we can do maybe is just duplicate this image here and then sort of drag that to the side and have that creeping in, just so it kind of goes off the side of the page. I think that's better. Sweet, so I want to keep this pretty minimal. Again, linking back to the magazine cover, so less is more. So I'm happy to leave the design elements here and just add in a bit more texture. I can start by adding this scan texture over the top to see how that looks. I think that's too black and white, to be honest. Maybe needs more of a grey. I do have this nice texture that I've been waiting to use. It's a bit more bluey, but we can drop that in there. But I think that's nice. Let's set that to lighter color. I do like that. Maybe it just needs to drop the opacity a bit though. Let's drop that down. Maybe 60-ish. That's looking good. And then I'm also going to create a 50% grey layer. And then what I can do to this is go up and then add some grain. And then once that is set, we can change that to hard light maybe. And then we can also drop that down a bit because that's too much as well. Just add a little touch of noise into there. And then I think I'm going to top this off with an absolute graphic design classic, which is the folded paper texture. It does help it look a little less flat. I think the trick is with this though, is to do it quite subtle. Drop it to like, I don't know, let's drop it down 30%, 38% or something. You almost don't want to notice it at first, but you know, it just kind of sits in the background. If you overdo it, it just looks really fake. And then I felt bad because this was a graffiti based design, which I hadn't really done anything by hand, and I stole the graffiti off the walls. So I thought, you know what, we can kind of add my own little touch to this by writing out Mixed Media Type 1 magazine on a piece of paper, just in a biro. My handwriting is not great, by the way. So there we are. In Photoshop, I can then play with the levels of this just so it kind of brings it out a little bit more. And then what I can do is I can mask the background out just so it becomes the nice clean text. And then I have this graphic, which then can sit over the top, and maybe I just move that overlapping at the bottom here. And then I could also probably drop the opacity down on that as well, because that's quite strong. So this is the post design. This is how it's looking on screen, ready to go to print. And when I'm back, I can show you what it looks like printed at A1. I'm gonna go pick that up. You just stay there and I'll only be a minute. Yeah? All right. Right, you ready guys? I got it. Got it. So here's the A1 print design of the poster. I'm hoping you can kind of see that. I'll grab the camera a second to show you a little bit closer up. The only thing I'm thinking at the moment, it does look pretty sick, but the colors, I don't know if you can see, are quite light. I'm gonna stand here so it doesn't blow out with my light. They're a little bit fainter than what I thought on the screen. They're also a little bit blue. Maybe I went a bit too heavy on the blue. But I guess that's the reality of printing, is sometimes you don't really know what the outcome is gonna be until you actually print it. So sometimes it's a bit of trial and error. Only thing is this cost me 25 quid. So yeah, we're not printing another one. But I like it, I think it looks good. What do you guys think? Let me show you in a bit more detail. I'll show you some close-ups. Now, why did I want to print this? Well, two reasons. Reason number one is I'm trying to create more of a physical archive of the stuff that I work on, just something to look back in a few years' time. I think a lot of the stuff that we work on and design purely for Instagram as well sort of lives and dies on there. It doesn't really have a mad shelf life. So it's nice to actually be able to look back at the physical prints, the textures, and yeah, think a bit about how you actually put that together. The second reason is because this is actually part of a content piece for TYPEONE Magazine as well. So showing the process of me designing it until the final outcome. And I thought having that physical print at the end would be a nice way to finish that piece of content rather than just having it on the screen. It sort of brings it to life a little bit more and it feels a little bit more lifestyle-y. So that's what we're going to get onto next, is how I actually put that process video together. So how I kind of set my files up, how I record, and then how I edit to make one of these kind of pacey process design videos that you see on Instagram Reels. So let's get into it. So quick word of advice, unless you're doing like a physical illustration or painting, actually design the outcome first. That is a little bit of camera trickery and I know that, but I find when I'm trying to film myself designing, and think more about the filming than what the actual work looks like. And I find it really difficult to actually create properly. So plan as much as you can before filming, and then if you have the outcome done already, it's even better. You can just sort of reverse engineer. So as you just saw, this is my finished outcome. So what we need to think about is how we can actually show the process in a nice and interesting way. Well, I like to show and build this in chronological order with some nice, quick, pacey music. It's easier to follow and it keeps the viewers engaged. For shorter form, it's less showing the full process and more the individual steps involved in that creation, often in a way that's easy to understand and follow. You essentially want people to understand the steps, even if they're not necessarily technical in the design side. I'll show you what I mean. So the way I normally start is with my project file. I'll go through and clean up any layers and remove anything that is not needed. I'll tidy it up, and then I'll also change the size to better suit a 9:16 screen, so you can move it up like so. And then I'll start to think about how I can design from the bottom up, so building those layers to show that process. So that usually starts with the background, but I always find that by adding in a background, if the background is a texture or is a light color, like a paper or a grain or something like that, it doesn't really look that interesting and it's not really that apparent. So when you're starting the content out, it's not really that engaging. So I'll start with the next layer, which is usually some sort of typography. So if this is the first time showing some text, I like to show, me writing it out super quickly. And then the more type that you bring into the composition, the user gets what you're doing. You can start adding that in simpler ways, either dragging it onto the screen or just having it sort of pop in, depending on what you're trying to do. Essentially, the viewer starts to understand like what you're doing here. You don't need to show it over and over again. Once you break it up with some other different design techniques, you can add some more type in, layer in. It's just about not repeating stuff and making it boring, because people have short attention spans, unfortunately. So you need to keep it interesting. Now then, bit of camera trickery, but instead of just adding this face in as a solid image, I decided to add in a mask and then inverse it. And then I just painted it in with a really soft brush. So this sort of gave that illusion of it being spray painted in, especially by showing it in sort of different paths and just building that anticipation for the final outcome. With some of the effects as well, you can just slowly record the changing slider, sometimes even more than what you need, just to sort of get the point across. And I finished it off this time with a texture, and instead of just overlaying it, I decided to scale it in. Again, this is just to make it easier to see what you're actually doing. Even if it isn't necessarily how you actually did it, it just helps portray that to a wider audience. One thing I always do, you don't necessarily have to do it, but when editing, I like to cut each of my shots to the beat of the song. I think it helps the audience sort of follow that along. And I also think it looks better and looks like more considered when you cut to the beat. So it didn't have to be every beat and as quick, but I still think if there's a consistent pacing throughout the video, it really helps with the viewer to follow along. I also find that my reels do a lot better when I use a certain type of song. It's always like an upbeat, pacey, usually like hip hop or an electronic sort of song, but it all depends on what you're actually doing and your style. I think as long as the music as well kind of matches or is in the same realm as the artwork, it really helps the two sort of work together, sort of complements to both of them. But these style of process videos are pretty popular and they do pretty well on Instagram. So maybe something for you to think about the next time that you create something that you're happy with, how you can film yourself, showing the process of your work as just another way to present it. I also wanted to say, although this video is not a paid ad or anything, I am a TYPEONE Magazine ambassador. So I did have a few of their magazines before I became an ambassador, to be fair. They are sick, but if you did want to go and pick up any of their issues, I can highly recommend them as an absolute design essential, to be honest. You can go and use my link down below if you want to go pick them up. I believe you get 10% off your order and an extra 30% off if you become an annual subscriber and pick up 2 issues. So I've got them all, but the link for that is below. Also, if you did want to learn more about the poster design process, then I've got a video linked on screen here, which I think you might like. But that is it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in a new video. So take care. I'll see you in a bit.